Hi there, in this tutorial, we will cover the expense entry page. We will do a deep dive on how to enter expense reports on the Coexsys Expense Tracking Cloud, submit expense reports for approval, upload your purchase receipts and track approvals. The expense report entry page is located under the expense tracking. Your existing expense reports are available under the drop-down menu on the top right corner of the screen. To create a new expense report, click the plus button here and enter the year and month for the new expense report. The Coexsys Expense Tracking Cloud maintains month-wise expense reports, meaning you can only maintain one expense report per month. All expense accounting, approvals and purchase receipts are maintained at expense report lines level. There is no restriction on number of expense lines you can create under a given month. As you scroll below, you will see the pay period for which the expense report will be created, the system-generated expense report title and your supervisor. Further below, you will see the core expense entry region. Expense reports go through the following lifecycle stages: entered, submitted, approved, or rejected. Select the type of expenditure from the drop-down, enter description, date on which expense occurred, and amount. Note that if you are also using the Project Cloud platform and time tracking, you can optionally select timesheet and assign project tasks to your expense report entry lines. You can also enter custom expenditure types in the Expense Tracking Cloud. If you are using Project Cloud, then you must set up expenditure type at the project level. Optionally, you can also upload purchase receipt images and attach it to the expense line. There are no limits on the number of images you can attach to an expense line. Once you have completed the expense entry details, press the Save Expense Line button, and you will see the data grid updated with the newly created expense line. Once the line is created, you can expand the line details by clicking the plus icon. Here you can see your uploaded receipts. On the data grid lines, there are a few features under the Action column. Let's check them out one by one. The first action icon is the View Selected Tasks. If your expense is for a specific project or task, you can associate that herewith. Next, edit the expense entry if you need to make an update to the previously entered entry. You can also delete an expense entry line if it is not submitted for the approval. Next, to submit an expense entry line, you can check this box. Note that the expense entry goes through approval steps. These are visual indicators where your expense entry line stands in the approval workflow. Next, select the approver where you want to submit your expense reports. Expense Tracking Cloud will route the approval workflow based on the approver defined under the Approval Management page. Next, you will see your on-screen analytics of expense reports you have submitted. You can see your period-to-date expenses breakdown by expenditure types. Finally, at the bottom of the expense report entry page, you will see a couple of tabs. These tabs contain supplementary information aimed at providing you complete picture and supplementary analytics for your expense reports. These are Activity Trail, Attendance, Time Tracking, and Submission History tabs. This completes the expense entry portion. Now that we have completed entering expense reports, let's go ahead and see the approver side as well. Next, we will log in as an approver account and approve the expense report we have just submitted. As mentioned earlier, approvers must be defined and enabled under the Approval Management page. After you log in as an approver, you will see the Manage Approval page under the expense tracking in the navigation panel. Under the Manage Approvals page, there are two tabs: Expense Reports Pending Approval and Approval History. You can also see the Approval Workbench button on the top right corner. Under the first tab, you will see List of Expense Reports awaiting approval. Click the little arrow icon on the right side to view the complete expense report. Next, click the Approval Workbench button. The Approval Workbench will allow you to approve multiple expense reports at the same time using the mass approval or mass rejection feature. Here you can see all expense entry lines for the expense report selected in the drop-down, approve or reject individual lines. Next, click the receipt icon to get a zoomed-in view of the receipt associated with the expense entry, and so on. You can also optionally enter comments while approving or rejecting an expense entry. Next, once all approvals are processed for a given expense report, you will see all approved or rejected expense report entries under Approval History tab. Now we will log out of the approval profile and log back in as the expense entry user. Here on the expense entry page, you will now notice a couple of updates. You will see the message that this expense report is closed. If there are no open or pending expense lines, then the Expense Tracking Cloud will automatically close expense report. No new expense report entry is allowed on a closed expense report. If you need to create new expense entry for the same period after the expense report is closed, you will need to create a new expense report. Next, you will see that the approval workflow indicator now shows green circle on the grid. This indicates that the expense line is approved for the payment. You can also see approver comment by hovering on the editor icon here. As we discussed earlier in this tutorial, you can see your period-to-date expenses and other supplementary information related to your expense report in these tabs below. The Expense Feeds page also is another great way to view your expense reports. Here you can see your recent expense reports, your expenditures by pay period and project-wise expenditure breakdowns. Next, you can also download expense reports in the Excel or PDF formats. Finally, let's go ahead and take a look at the reports too. Expense tracking reports are located under the Expense Tracking menu from the main navigation panel. You can print your expense report using the Print Expense Report button. The report allows you to print or reprint multiple expense reports at the same time. Simply enter parameter ranges as shown here and click the Search button. You can redirect the output to a printer or a PDF file. This completes the demo for the expense entry and approval. Thank you.